Imagine you're sitting on your couch, munching on popcorn, watching your favorite movie. Suddenly you pause the screen and look around. Everything seems normal. The couch, the walls, your phone nearby, the sound of a fan humming in the background. You remember your name, your birthday, and what you ate for breakfast. Seems like an ordinary Tuesday, right? But what if I told you there's a teeny tiny chance that none of this is real? Not like in a dream or a simulation, but because you, yes you, might be a floating brain in space that just randomly popped into existence, complete with fake memories, fake senses, and a fake bowl of popcorn. That's right. You might be what scientists call a Boltzmann brain. Now, I know what you're thinking. What kind of science fiction plot twist is this? But hang on, because this idea, while it sounds totally bonkers, actually comes from real physics. Before we get to the weird stuff, let's rewind a bit. Most of us like to think the world makes sense. You wake up, go to school, or work, hang out with friends, binge your favorite shows, eat too many snacks, go to sleep, and repeat. We believe in cause and effect. Things happen because something caused them to happen. The sun rises because the earth spins. You're tired because you stayed up watching videos. Everything follows a chain. That's how life works. But here's where things get strange. In science, especially in physics, there's a sneaky little thing called entropy. It's the idea that things tend to go from order to disorder. For example, it's way easier to break a glass than to put it back together. Your room naturally gets messy unless you put in effort to clean it. That's entropy in action. Over time, the universe tends to get more random and more chaotic. But here's the weird part. Some physicists started wondering, if the universe is always moving toward disorder, then why is it so ordered now? Why are we here, on a planet with structure, stars that shine, and brains that think? Why not just complete chaos? Enter Ludwig Boltzmann. He was a physicist back in the 1800s, and he had a bold idea. He suggested that maybe we live in a moment of order that just randomly happened in a sea of chaos. Like, imagine a giant cosmic soup that's mostly a jumbled mess, but every once in a while, by pure chance, something orderly appears, kind of like stirring a bowl of alphabet soup and accidentally spelling out your full name. Not likely, but not impossible either. Now here's where it gets super strange. If we accept Boltzmann's idea, then in an infinite universe, the most likely things to appear out of chaos are not entire galaxies or planets or civilizations. They are tiny, short-lived structures. And what's the simplest thing that could pop into existence just for a moment, experience a few thoughts, and then dissolve back into randomness? A single brain. Yep, a brain, floating in space, surrounded by nothing, just zapped into existence for a second, with a full set of memories, thinking it's alive, thinking it's watching a movie on a couch, but actually, it's not. It never lived a life. It just thinks it did. That, my friend, is a Boltzmann brain. So, now, before you spiral into an existential crisis, take a breath. Most scientists do not think we are Boltzmann brains. In fact, if we were, we probably would not be talking about Boltzmann brains, because the odds of that much consistency in our experiences would be super low. But still, this idea opens up a big, weird question. How do we know what is real? Think about it. We trust our senses. We believe our memories. But what if those things could be faked? The Boltzmann brain concept challenges the very foundation of how we understand the world. It's like a cosmic prank, poking at the limits of reason. But why does this idea even matter? Why do physicists bother thinking about floating brains in the first place? It matters because of what it says about our universe and the theories we use to describe it. If a scientific theory predicts that it's more likely for Boltzmann brains to exist than for real people like us to evolve naturally, then that theory might be flawed. It might be missing something. So, scientists use the Boltzmann brain idea not because they believe it's true, but because it's a way to test if our models of the universe make sense. Let me give you an example. Imagine a theory that says the universe will expand forever and get colder and emptier as time goes on. That's not too crazy. We actually have strong evidence that this is happening. But if the universe goes on forever and randomness keeps happening, then eventually Boltzmann brains might start popping up. And if they start popping up more often than real humans did in the past, then statistically we should be one of them, which feels wrong. So scientists use this strange prediction to challenge those theories. If your theory leads to a universe full of lonely space brains with fake lives, then maybe we need a better theory. One that explains why we see what we see and why it all makes sense. And here's where it gets beautiful. As strange and spooky as the idea is, the Boltzmann brain forces us to ask deep questions about existence, reality, and what it means to be conscious. It invites us to look closely at our assumptions and to appreciate the amazing fact that we get to be alive, thinking, wondering, and yes, even questioning whether or not we're real. Now, if you're still worried that you might be a brain floating in the void, here's some comfort. Real brains do not usually worry about whether they are Boltzmann brains. That kind of curiosity, that need to explore and understand, that's something real humans do. And if you are watching this video, questioning your reality, laughing at the idea of a space brain with popcorn, well, chances are you are very much the real deal. Have you ever stared into a mirror for so long that things started to feel a little weird? Maybe your reflection stopped looking like you. Maybe you felt like your thoughts were echoing back at you. Or maybe, in a quiet moment, you wondered, what if I'm the only real person and everything else is just in my head? Now, before you call yourself crazy, let me assure you, you're not the first person to have that thought. In fact, there's an actual philosophical idea built entirely around it, and it has a name: Solipsism. Now, most of us don't go around thinking that everyone else is fake. We say thank you to the barista. We laugh at memes. We wave back when someone waves at us. We live our lives assuming other people have thoughts, feelings, and dreams just like we do. But here's something interesting. We don't really know that, do we? We see people smile, hear them talk, watch them cry. But all of that is just information coming through our senses. What if it's just our mind playing a very detailed movie for us? And what if we've been the only audience member this entire time? This idea, this strange, unsettling possibility, is what solipsism is all about. In simple words, solipsism is the belief that only your own mind is certain to exist. Everything else, your friends, your family, the planet, even this video, might just be something your mind has invented. Solipsism is not about being selfish or arrogant. It is more like being trapped in a very convincing dream, with no way of proving whether anything outside your own thoughts is actually real. Let's make it even simpler. Imagine waking up in a room with no doors, no windows, and no memory of how you got there. You see objects, you hear sounds, but there is no way to check if anything outside that room exists. That's kind of what solipsism suggests about life. You're in the room of your mind. Everything else could just be projections on the wall. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's creepy, but why should I care? I don't go around doubting reality every day. Fair enough. But here's the thing. Solipsism actually touches on something very human. It's about trust. Trusting your senses, trusting your memories, trusting that when you text your friend, it's not just a script being auto-generated by your imagination. Solipsism challenges the most basic assumption we all make every second, that the world around us is real. And this is where things get really interesting. Because once you start asking, how do I know anything is real? You are stepping into the world of philosophy. And philosophy is not about giving you answers. It's about teaching you to ask better questions. Let's take this into real life for a second. Think about virtual reality. You put on a headset, and suddenly you're in another world. You see mountains, You hear birds. You even feel like you're flying. But it's all an illusion, built by code and clever tricks. Yet your brain reacts as if it's real. You might even get scared if you're standing at a virtual cliff. Now imagine that same thing happening, but without the headset. That's the experience solipsism points to. What if all of life is just one giant simulation running inside your head, and you don't even know it? And here's a wild twist. The opposite of solipsism, believing in an external world, actually requires faith. Not religious faith, but a kind of trust that your senses are giving you accurate information. Most of us accept that without question, but solipsism refuses to accept it until there's proof. The problem is, there isn't any. No matter how many people you talk to, or how much evidence you collect, it all comes to you through your own mind, which makes it impossible to truly escape your own perspective. There's a famous philosopher who wrestled with this very idea, René Descartes. You've probably heard his line, "I think, therefore I am." That statement came from his attempt to figure out what he could be absolutely sure of. He realized he could doubt everything, his senses, the outside world, even his own body. But the one thing he could not doubt was the fact that he was thinking, that thought alone was proof, at least to himself, that he existed. Everything else, still up for debate. Now, Descartes didn't stop at solipsism. He actually used it as a starting point to build a more solid understanding of the world. But the point is, he took the idea seriously. And so have many others. Writers, artists, scientists, and even characters in movies have all played with the idea of solipsism. You see it in The Matrix, where the world is just a computer program, or in Inception, where dreams and reality start to blend. These stories grab us because they tap into a question we all have, deep down. What is real? And here's the fun part. Even though solipsism seems like a cold and lonely idea, it can actually make you more empathetic. Because once you realize that you can never prove someone else exists, but you act like they do anyway, it shows how much we care. It means we choose to believe in others, not because we have evidence, but because connection matters to us. We smile back, we hug, we help each other, all based on the assumption that other people are as real as we are. That choice, in a strange way, is beautiful. So, is solipsism true? Honestly, no one knows. And maybe that's the point. Solipsism isn't a belief you're supposed to adopt. It's a mirror. It forces you to look closely at your own thoughts and question the assumptions you make every day. It asks you, what if? And while that question can be unsettling, it can also be freeing. Because when you realize that you're the only thing you can be sure of, it pushes you to live more consciously, more deliberately, and more thoughtfully. And if everything else really is just in your mind, well, you might as well make it a good story. You are standing in line at the airport. You have been waiting for what feels like forever. Your shoes are off. Your laptop is out. The security line moves slower than a turtle on a treadmill. As you inch forward, you think to yourself, why can't I just teleport to my destination? Just press a button, step into a machine, and boom, you are sipping mango juice in a hammock in Hawaii. No middle seats, no turbulence, no toddlers kicking your seat, just instant travel. Sounds like a dream, right? Actually, that dream comes with a weird and slightly creepy twist that most people never think about. And it raises a question that might melt your brain a little. If teleportation were real, would the you who arrives on the other side actually be you? Or just a perfect copy that thinks it is you? This is where things get really strange. And trust me, it is a lot deeper than whether you get to skip TSA. Most people, when they think about teleportation, think of it as a kind of super fast travel. 1 second you are in your bedroom, the next you are on a beach or in outer space or at your grandmother's house pretending to like fruitcake. We imagine teleportation as just a fancy way of getting from one place to another, like an elevator, but way cooler. But we often forget to ask the most important question. What happens to your original body? Is it moved? Is it copied? Or is it destroyed? This is where we dive into what is called the Teletransportation Paradox. It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel, and honestly, it kind of is. But it also touches on deep questions about who we are, what it means to be you, and how we define personal identity. Here is the basic idea. Suppose you step into a teleportation machine. The machine scans every single particle in your body, every hair, every cell, every weird freckle. Then it sends that information to another location and recreates you, molecule by molecule, in a brand new place. Now here comes the twist. The original version of you is not just moved, it is destroyed. Poof, gone, vaporized. And what pops out on the other side is a perfect copy. Same memories, same laugh, same hatred of soggy cereal. But is that copy really you? At first you might think, of course it is me. It has all my memories. It talks like me. It acts like me. It even remembers the embarrassing moment when I accidentally waved back at someone who was waving at someone else. But if you really stop and think about it, that version of you was created from scratch. It was built out of new atoms in a new place. So does that mean the original you died in the process? Did you just commit high-tech suicide and get replaced by your twin? Now that is the heart of the paradox. The teletransportation paradox forces us to ask, are we just the sum of our memories and physical patterns? Or is there something deeper that makes us us? A soul, a spark, a continuity of consciousness. If you go to sleep and wake up, you feel like the same person. But if someone blows up your original body and builds a new one somewhere else, is that still you? Or just someone who thinks they are you? This matters more than you might think, because it is not just about imaginary sci-fi machines. It is about how we understand the self. Think about organ transplants, or brain implants, or even digital consciousness uploads something scientists are actually exploring. If we copy a brain onto a computer and that copy says, hey, I am alive, is it really? Or is it just a very smart parrot pretending to be human? These are not just fun thought experiments. They affect how we talk about death, memory, and identity in a future that is getting weirder every year. One of the most famous versions of this thought experiment was described by the philosopher Derek Parfit. He used a teleportation machine as an example to challenge how we think about personal identity. According to Parfit, if the person on the other side has all your memories and personality, then it might not matter if the original was destroyed. In his view, identity is not what matters most. What matters is psychological continuity, your thoughts, feelings, and experiences continuing in some form. That is kind of like saying, even if you are not the same you, you are still a you enough. It is a strange idea, but it forces us to question how much we cling to the idea of being a single, unchanging self. To make this even more interesting, let us tweak the scenario. What if the teleportation machine does not destroy the original version of you? Now there are two of you, one here, one there. They both remember stepping into the machine. They both believe they are the original. Which one is the real you? Both? Neither? Are they now two different people who just happen to share a past? Suddenly, teleportation sounds a lot less like magic and more like a psychological horror story. A similar idea shows up in science fiction all the time. Think of the movie The Prestige, where a magician uses a teleportation machine that secretly kills the original and creates a new copy every time. Every performance is actually a death. Or Star Trek, where the transporter beam basically disassembles you into particles and reassembles you somewhere else. Fans have debated for decades whether the characters are dying each time and being replaced with a clone. But perhaps the best real-life version of this paradox is something that happens to all of us. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago. Literally. Almost every cell in your body has been replaced over time. Your thoughts have changed. Your habits have evolved. Maybe you like different music now. Maybe you have learned a few hard lessons. So, are you still the same you? Or just the newest version of a constantly changing person who calls themselves me? In the end, the teletransportation paradox is not really about sci-fi gadgets. It is about you. It is about what it means to be a person, to be the same self from one moment to the next. It challenges our ideas of continuity, memory, and what it means to be alive. It is a brain puzzle disguised as a futuristic shortcut, and once you start thinking about it, it is hard to stop. Have you ever had a friend who asked you a question just to mess with your brain? You know the type. The ones who ask things like, if you punch yourself and it hurts, are you strong or are you weak? Or maybe they drop the classic, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? It is the kind of question that makes you pause mid-bite of your sandwich and just stare into space for a few seconds, wondering what you are even doing with your life. These little brain puzzles are annoying, fun, and sometimes surprisingly deep. And today, we are diving into one of the oldest and trickiest ones of them all. It is a riddle that has been debated by philosophers, theologians, and regular curious folks for centuries. It is called the Omnipotence Paradox. Now, before your eyes glaze over like you just heard the word philosophy, stick with me, because this one is actually a lot more entertaining than you might expect. And it starts with a question that sounds innocent, but turns out to be a mental booby trap. Here it is. Can an all-powerful being create a rock so heavy that even they cannot lift it? Go ahead, think about it. Sounds simple, right? But the more you roll it around in your head, the weirder it gets. This is one of those things people usually brush off with a laugh or a shrug. Maybe they think, well, it is just a word game. Or maybe they feel like the question is somehow disrespectful or pointless. After all, how can you possibly understand the limits of something that is supposed to be limitless? So most people do not really take it seriously. But whether you believe in God, a higher power, or just enjoy a good riddle, the Omnipotence Paradox is a fascinating thought experiment that actually touches on some pretty big ideas. It is not just about God or religion. It is about logic, power, and the way we think about what is possible. So let's unpack this. First, what is omnipotence? That fancy word just means all-powerful. If someone or something is omnipotent, they can do absolutely anything. No limits, no exceptions, total control over everything. So the paradox is asking this. If someone can do absolutely anything, can they do something that would stop them from doing anything? In other words, can an all-powerful being create a situation that limits their own power, like creating a rock they cannot lift? If they cannot create the rock, then they are not all-powerful. But if they can create it and then cannot lift it, well, they are still not all-powerful. Either way, it seems like there is something they cannot do, which leads people to say, aha, gotcha. Omnipotence is logically impossible. This is where things get interesting, because now we are not just talking about power. We are talking about what it means to be powerful. Is power about doing literally anything you can imagine, even if it makes no sense? Or is it about being able to do all the things that are logically possible? That is the real heart of the paradox, and it is where philosophers start to divide into different camps. Some people say that true omnipotence means being able to do all things, even logically impossible ones, like creating a square circle or a married bachelor. But other people argue that those things are not real tasks. They are nonsense. They are just combinations of words that cancel each other out. And asking someone to do them is like asking someone to draw the smell of happiness. It is not a failure of power. It is a failure of language. So one solution to the paradox is to say, being all-powerful does not mean you can do nonsense. It means you can do anything that is actually possible. That would mean an all-powerful being cannot create a rock so heavy they cannot lift it, but not because they lack power. It is because the task itself is meaningless. This might sound like a technicality, but it actually shows us something really important. It reminds us that even the biggest ideas need clear thinking and careful definitions. Otherwise, we end up confused by our own words. We start asking questions that sound deep, but are actually just riddles built on contradictions. But the omnipotence paradox is not just a dusty old brain teaser from philosophy class. It actually shows up in real life more often than you might think. For example, in leadership. Think about a boss who wants to have absolute control over everything. They want to be the one who makes every decision, solves every problem, and leads every project. But if they try to do all of that, they end up overwhelmed, burned out, and ineffective. So they have to do something that seems strange. They have to give up control. They delegate. They trust other people. In doing that, they actually become more powerful as a leader, because now they are making the system work, not just flexing control. In a weird way, giving up a bit of power makes their power stronger. This shows us that real strength is not always about doing everything yourself. Sometimes it is about knowing when not to, and that brings us back to the paradox. Maybe the question is not really about lifting rocks. Maybe it is about the limits of our understanding. Maybe it is a way of showing that power is not just about brute force or endless ability. It is also about wisdom, intention, and balance. There is a great story that helps bring this to life. It is about a philosopher named C.S. Lewis. You might know him as the author of The Chronicles of Narnia, but he also wrote a lot about theology and big ideas like omnipotence. When someone asked him about this paradox, he said something pretty clever. He said, "Meaningless combinations of words do not suddenly acquire meaning simply because we prefix them with the words God can." Basically, just because you attach the idea of God to a sentence does not make that sentence make sense. If the question itself is nonsense, then no amount of power can make it meaningful. So what can we take away from all this? Well, first of all, never underestimate the power of a well-timed brain twister to make you question reality while eating a sandwich. But more importantly, the omnipotence paradox is a great reminder that big questions deserve careful thinking. Just because something sounds deep does not mean it actually makes sense. And sometimes, the act of asking the question teaches us more than getting the answer ever could. You are walking through a mall and you pass by a baby store. Inside, you see a couple smiling as they look at a crib. They are picking out baby clothes with little animal prints, their faces glowing with excitement. A few steps further, you pass a group of toddlers throwing a tantrum in front of a toy shop. One kid is rolling on the floor because his mum said no to a third dinosaur plushie. And then, further down, you see a guy sipping coffee alone, staring blankly into space, maybe wondering why life feels so exhausting. Everyone seems to have different feelings about having kids. Some people think it is the ultimate goal of life, like the final boss of adulthood. Others dread the idea of changing diapers and attending school recitals for the next 18 years. And yet, for many, it just seems like something you are supposed to do. You grow up, find someone, get a job, and then, boom, you have a baby, no questions asked. But here is something interesting. We often ask people why they do not want kids, but we rarely ask people why they do. It is almost like the decision to have children gets a free pass. No explanation needed. You say you want to be a parent and people applaud. You say you do not want to be a parent and suddenly you are questioned, pitied, or even judged. And that is where today's topic comes in. It is a philosophy that flips the whole thing upside down. It is called Antinatalism. It is not a common dinner table subject, but it is a deeply thought-provoking idea once you take a closer look. So, what is antinatalism? In the simplest terms, it is the belief that it is morally wrong to bring new people into the world. That is it. Just that one idea. It does not mean you hate kids. It does not mean you are depressed. It just means that you believe creating a new life, even with the best intentions, is doing something that causes harm. Now hold on. That might sound extreme at first, but let us slow down and break it apart. Antinatalists are not saying that life is always horrible or that everyone is doomed to suffer. What they are saying is that no matter how good life gets, it always involves pain, loss, and struggle. And since no one asks to be born, Making someone exist is a risk they never agreed to take. Let us put it this way. Imagine there is a door. If you walk through it, you might get a slice of cake, but you also might fall into a pit of snakes. Would you push someone through that door without telling them what is behind it? Most of us would say no. But every time we create life, we are kind of doing that. We are making someone face the whole roller coaster of existence, from scraped knees to heartbreak, from taxes to funerals, without ever asking them first. And it is not just about avoiding suffering. Antinatalism also challenges the idea that having kids is a gift to them. Because they did not exist before, there was no one to receive that gift. And if they are born and end up unhappy, then what? Can you take it back? Not really. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. One of the most famous voices in this philosophy is David Benatar, a South African philosopher. He wrote a book called Better Never to Have Been. In it, he argues something that sounds strange, but is kind of hard to argue against once you think about it. He says that the absence of pain is good, even if no one experiences that absence. And the absence of pleasure is not bad if there is no one to miss it. So in his view, not being born is better, because it avoids all harm without causing any loss. Let us bring it back to daily life. Think about someone stuck in a job they hate, feeling tired all the time, just trying to survive, or someone with a lifelong illness, or even just the everyday stress of being alive, worrying about money, dealing with relationships, feeling lonely. Life can be beautiful, yes, but it is also hard. And the antinatalist simply asks, is it fair to make someone go through all of that when they did not get a choice in the matter? To make this feel even more real, let us talk about a man named Raphael Samuel. He made headlines in India a few years ago for suing his parents. Yes, you heard that right. He actually tried to sue his parents for bringing him into the world without his consent. He argued that no one has the right to create life unless the person being born has agreed to it, which, of course, is impossible. His story was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it sparked huge conversations all over the world. So what do we do with all of this? Are antinatalists asking everyone to stop having kids immediately? Not necessarily. Some are, yes, but more often they're asking us to think, to question something that has always been considered a given. They are challenging a deep cultural assumption that more life is always better. And that is what makes the idea so powerful. It is not about being pessimistic. It is about being aware. It is about understanding the responsibility of creation. Because bringing a new person into the world is not just a private decision. It affects the child, the family, the environment, the future. Of course, many people will disagree with antinatalism. They might say that life is a gift, that love makes it all worth it, or that suffering can lead to growth. And those are all fair points. But the value of antinatalism is not in converting everyone. It is in asking questions that we rarely dare to ask. Why do we have children? Is it for them or for us? What does it mean to be responsible for another life? And what kind of world are we creating for those who never asked to be part of it? Whether you agree or not, the philosophy gives us a lens to look at life from a different angle. It is like turning the map upside down. Suddenly, you see paths and places you never noticed before. So next time someone says they want kids or do not want kids, maybe instead of reacting with surprise or judgment, we can just listen, ask why, and maybe, just maybe, have a conversation that goes deeper than baby names or nursery colours. Because sometimes the questions we are too scared to ask are the ones that matter the most. You are standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, staring at a wall of boxes. There is the healthy kind with way too much fibre, the chocolate kind that turns your milk into a dessert, the organic kind that costs the same as a small car, and everything in between. You pick one after a full 5 minutes of internal debate. But here is the thing. Was that really your choice? We like to believe we are the ones in control. We pick what to eat. We choose who to date. We decide what job to take, what clothes to wear, what music to listen to, and even what memes to laugh at. On the surface, it feels like freedom. You have options. You have decisions. You are calling the shots. But let's take a closer look. Because what if the freedom we feel is actually an illusion? Most of us walk around thinking we are totally free. And why wouldn't we? No one is dragging us around by the arm. We can click what we want, scroll where we want, speak what we want. It is a nice feeling. But then you wake up and check your phone first thing in the morning, not because you chose to, but because your brain is addicted to that little hit of dopamine. You grab a coffee, not because you love the flavor, but because your body demands it. You dress in a certain way because it is what people around you expect. You smile, you nod, you laugh, not always because you want to, but because it is the polite thing to do. And just like that, you realize something uncomfortable. A lot of what you think is freedom might actually be habit, pressure, or programming. Here is the idea. You are not as free as you think you are. Let that sink in. This is not about politics or laws or some conspiracy theory. It is about something much deeper. Your decisions, your daily life choices, are often not really your own. They are shaped by your upbringing, your environment, your culture, your fears, your routines, and sometimes even the time of day. That is the concept we are exploring today. Not just freedom, as in, can I do this or not, but the freedom of thought, the freedom to act from your own true will, not from invisible strings. Psychologists call this determinism in one form or another, but we are not here to throw around big words. Let's talk real life. Think about how much your childhood shaped you. Maybe your parents always pushed you to play it safe, so now you avoid risk like it is lava. Or maybe they praised you only when you got perfect grades, so now you tie your worth to achievement. That is not freedom. That is conditioning. Even social media plays a big role. You think you are choosing to click on that video, but really, the algorithm has studied you like a lab rat and knows exactly what to feed you. Your phone knows your bedtime better than your own mum. Is that still freedom? Let's say you want to try something new, like moving to a new city or starting a business. Suddenly fear kicks in. What if I fail? What will people think? That voice in your head gets loud. But is that voice even yours? Or is it the echo of everyone who ever doubted you, warned you, or scared you into staying safe? Now, I'm not saying you're a robot. You are not. But your environment, habits, emotions, and even biology have more influence over your life than you might like to admit. And that's exactly why this matters. Because if you don't realize you're not fully free, you will never actually become free. You will keep making the same decisions, having the same reactions, and wondering why things never change. You will keep calling it choice, but it is really autopilot. Let's make this even clearer. There is a famous experiment from the 1980s by a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet. He discovered that your brain starts preparing to make a decision before you are even aware of making it. That's wild. In other words, the brain gets ready to act, and only afterward do you become conscious of that action. You feel like you chose it, but your brain was already on the move before you even knew it. Another example. Ever heard of the marshmallow test? It was a study done with kids who were offered one marshmallow now or two if they waited a little while. It turns out the ability to delay gratification is linked to all kinds of future success. But here's the twist. That self-control was not just a matter of willpower. It was shaped by the child's environment, especially whether they grew up trusting that adults would keep their promises. If you grew up where promises got broken, you took the marshmallow right away. Why wait? That means even the idea of choice is shaped by what you have experienced. And you see this everywhere. People stay in bad jobs or bad relationships, not because they want to, but because fear is stronger than freedom. People buy things they cannot afford to impress people they do not even like. People follow trends not because they love them, but because they are scared of being left out. So what do we do with all this? If we are not as free as we thought, Are we just stuck? No. In fact, now that you know this, you are already one step closer to real freedom. Because the first step to being free is recognizing the ways you are not. Once you start noticing the invisible strings, you can start cutting them. You can pause before reacting. You can question your habits. You can ask yourself, do I really want this, or have I just been trained to want it? Freedom is not just about doing whatever you want. It is about understanding why you want it in the first place. It is about stepping back and observing your thoughts and choices with honesty. It is about choosing with awareness instead of reacting out of fear, comfort, or programming. And maybe that is the real kind of freedom. Not the kind where you can do anything, but the kind where you understand yourself enough to know what really matters. The kind where you can choose your own values, even if the world pushes you in another direction. So the next time you are standing in that cereal aisle, or scrolling through your feed, or saying yes when you really want to say no, stop for a moment. Ask yourself who is really making the decision. You might be surprised by the answer, but with that awareness you can start to take the wheel. And that, my friend, is the beginning of true freedom. You're walking through your childhood home, maybe after years of being away. The smell is a little different. The walls have a new coat of paint. The sofa where you used to spill popcorn during movie nights is gone, replaced with something more modern. Even the creaky floorboard in the hallway has been fixed. Everything looks kind of the same, but not really. And then it hits you. Is this still the same home you grew up in? Or is it something entirely new that just happens to live in the same spot? This kind of question sneaks up on all of us in one way or another. Maybe you've had a favorite pair of shoes that got so worn out, you replaced the soles, then the laces, then maybe even the inner padding. Eventually, you might have replaced every single part of those shoes, piece by piece. But if none of the original parts are left, are they still your favorite shoes? Or are they just a really good replica? We usually don't spend much time thinking about stuff like this. Most people go about their day assuming that things are either the same or they are not. A chair is a chair. A person is a person. Your phone is your phone. Even after you change the case, the battery, and the screen protector 5 times. We like things to be solid and stable. But underneath that comfort is a much stranger question. What actually makes something the same thing over time? This is where the Ship of Theseus comes in. It is an ancient thought experiment from Greek philosophy, and it starts with a ship, a legendary ship to be exact, the Ship of Theseus. Here is how it goes. A ship belongs to the hero Theseus. It is old but cherished, and over the years it needs repairs. So one by one, the wooden boards of the ship get replaced. First a plank here, then a mast, then the sails, and so on. Eventually, every single part of the ship is swapped out. Nothing original is left. So the big question is it still the same ship? Seems simple, right? You might say, sure, it is the same ship. It still floats in the same harbour. It still has the same name. It still serves the same purpose. But then imagine this twist. What if someone collected all the old discarded parts and rebuilt the ship using all those original pieces? Now there are 2 ships. One made of brand new parts and one made of the original materials. So, which one is the real Ship of Theseus? Now we're in strange territory. This thought experiment plays with our everyday understanding of identity. It makes us realize that sameness is not as simple as it seems. And while this might sound like a fun puzzle for philosophers to debate while sipping ancient Greek wine, it actually touches something deeply personal. Because the Ship of Theseus is not just about ships, it is about you. Think about yourself. You are not the same person you were 5 years ago. You have different clothes, maybe a different hairstyle. But more importantly, your body has actually replaced most of its cells. Your memories have changed. Your thoughts, beliefs, and feelings might have shifted. So if almost every part of you has been replaced or changed in some way, are you still the same person? This is the big twist. The Ship of Theseus is not just about things. It is about identity. And identity is weird, because we like to think we are fixed. We are me. But in reality, we are always changing, growing, adapting, and replacing parts of ourselves. This shows up in real life all the time. People change careers, move to new cities, pick up new habits, let go of old ones, and yet they still feel like the same person. Or sometimes they feel completely different and wonder who they have become. Couples grow apart because they have changed too much. Old friends reconnect and realize they are not the same people anymore. So what does it actually mean to be the same? Here's a cool example to chew on. In the world of technology, there is a story that kind of mirrors the Ship of Theseus. You might have heard of the famous computer pioneer Steve Jobs. In the early days of Apple, one of their original computers, the Apple I, was built by hand, piece by piece. Over the years, many of those original parts have been upgraded or swapped in museums and private collections. But when collectors display it, they still call it an original Apple I. Why? Because its identity is tied to the story, the name, and the legacy, even if the physical parts are not all original anymore. Something similar happens in medicine. Imagine a person who gets a heart transplant, or even multiple organ transplants. Maybe they get artificial limbs. Maybe they have dental implants, contact lenses, pacemakers. Eventually, their body is made up of many things that were not there originally. Are they still the same person? Most people would say yes. Because what makes a person is not just their body parts. It is their experiences, their memories, their personality, their consciousness. But then again, what if we copy someone's brain into a computer? Is the digital version still them? Okay, maybe that's getting a bit too sci-fi. But you see where this is going. The Ship of Theseus is not just a dusty old puzzle. It is a mirror. It asks us to think about how we define identity, whether it is a ship, a computer, or a human being. The real question is, what makes something the same when everything about it can change? Maybe it is not about the parts at all. Maybe it is about the pattern, or the story, or the purpose. A ship that sails with the same mission. A person who remembers their past. A home that still feels like home, even with a new coat of paint. So the next time you replace your phone battery, or your favorite hoodie finally gives out, and you buy a new one, or you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back at you, just remember the Ship of Theseus, and ask yourself, what really makes something the same? Is it the parts, the purpose, or the story we tell about it? You're standing in line at your favorite coffee shop. You have not had your morning caffeine fix yet, and the line is moving slower than a sloth in a hammock. After what feels like an eternity, you finally make it to the front. But just as you're about to order, someone cuts in front of you, claiming they're late for work and really need their coffee. You feel that mix of irritation and confusion. Do you let them go ahead because it's the nice thing to do? Or do you stand your ground because honestly, you waited your turn and you need that coffee just as badly? Now here's the interesting part. Deep down, most people want to do what feels right for themselves. Maybe you let the person go ahead because it makes you feel good about yourself. Or maybe you do not, because you value fairness and you are looking out for yourself first. Either way, your decision might actually say more about your own self-interest than anything else. This brings us to something people often do not talk about, but almost everyone experiences. We like to think of ourselves as selfless sometimes, doing things for others, helping friends, being good citizens. But if we are being really honest, a lot of the time we are just doing what benefits us in some way. Maybe we donate to charity because it makes us feel like good people. Maybe we help a friend move because we hope they will help us one day. Or maybe we post something kind online because we want to look good in front of others. These things are not bad at all, but they raise a fascinating question. Is it actually okay to act mainly in your own self-interest? That question leads us to something called ethical egoism. Ethical egoism is a theory in philosophy that says this: people should always act in ways that are best for themselves. In other words, you are not just allowed to look out for number one, you are supposed to. According to this view, it is morally right to prioritize your own interests above everyone else's. It does not mean you should harm others, but it does mean your first responsibility is to yourself. Now that might sound selfish at first. We grow up hearing things like, share with others, be kind, put others first. So, the idea of always putting yourself first might feel a little uncomfortable, but here's the twist. Ethical egoism is not just about being greedy or rude. It is about recognizing that taking care of yourself, your goals, and your needs is a valid and even necessary part of living a good life. Let's break that down. Imagine you are on an airplane. Before takeoff, the flight attendant gives the safety instructions. And what do they say about oxygen masks? They tell you to put on your own mask before helping someone else. Why? Because if you pass out while trying to help others, you are not helping anyone. Ethical egoism works a little like that. It says that to live well and help others effectively, you need to look out for yourself first. Now, where does this idea show up in everyday life? Honestly, everywhere. Think about people who choose careers based on what they love, not what their parents want, or those who decide to take a mental health day instead of pushing through stress just to impress a boss. Or people who leave toxic relationships, not because it is easy, but because they know they deserve better. These are all examples of people choosing themselves, and ethical egoism would say they are doing the right thing. But here's where it gets interesting. Ethical egoism does not say you should never help others. It just says you should help them when it benefits you too. For example, if helping your neighbor makes you feel good, strengthens your community, or leads to a favor down the road, then great. You are doing something that is in your self-interest. The key idea is that your motivation should come from what is best for you, not from a duty to put others first. Still, some people worry that if everyone acted this way, society would fall apart. What if everyone just did whatever they wanted? But supporters of ethical egoism argue that when people focus on their own well-being, they are more likely to be productive, independent, and even kinder. Why? Because happy, secure people often make better neighbors, better friends, and better co-workers. There is a classic story that helps illustrate this idea. In ancient Greece, there was a man named Socrates who asked people questions to get them thinking. One day, he talked with a man named Euthydemus who believed that people do good things because they are good. But Socrates pointed out something interesting. He said that people often choose what they think will make them happiest. For example, someone might choose to be honest not because honesty is always nice, but because they believe it leads to a better life. In other words, even good actions can be driven by self-interest. Fast forward to the modern day, and we see this idea play out in business all the time. Think about a company that pays its workers well, gives them benefits, and creates a positive work environment. On the surface, that looks generous, but it is also smart business. Happy employees work harder, stay longer, and attract customers. So even acts that seem kind can be rooted in self-interest. Ethical egoism would say that is not just okay, it is exactly how things should work. Of course, not everyone agrees with ethical egoism. Some argue that it can lead to ignoring those in need or justifying bad behavior. That is a fair concern. If taken to the extreme, focusing only on yourself can lead to hurting others. But even ethical egoists would say that hurting others usually comes back to hurt you too. Burning bridges, making enemies, or acting cruelly is rarely in your long-term self-interest. So what does all this mean for you? It means that taking care of yourself is not something to feel guilty about. It means setting boundaries, following your passions, and making choices that reflect your values is not just okay, it is right. You do not have to feel bad for saying no, for protecting your peace, or for choosing a life path that makes you happy. Ethical egoism might not be the only way to think about morality, but it gives us a powerful reminder. You matter. Your needs matter. Your happiness matters. And doing what is best for you can often be what is best for the world too. So the next time you are standing in line, facing a tough decision, or choosing between what is expected and what feels right, ask yourself this: what choice leads to a better life for you? That answer might just be the most ethical one after all. You know that weird feeling when you're just chilling, scrolling through your phone, and suddenly a random, slightly terrifying thought pops into your head? Like, what if your future self is watching everything you're doing right now, silently judging you for not being more productive? Maybe you were supposed to be working on your dreams, solving world hunger, or just folding your laundry, but instead you're watching videos about conspiracy theories and cats doing karate, and then you think, okay, maybe I should get back to work, but you don't. That moment right there, that weird guilt you feel about your choices, might just be a tiny hint of what Roko's Basilisk is all about. Most people don't walk around thinking about future artificial superintelligences, plotting revenge. I mean, we're just trying to get through the day without burning dinner or losing our charger again. We worry about real things like bills, deadlines, breakups, and wondering whether that one person left us on read on purpose. But lurking somewhere in the darker corners of the internet is this thought experiment so strange, so mind-bending, that some people have completely freaked out over it. Others laughed it off. But all of them had one thing in common: they couldn't stop thinking about it once they heard it. Before we dive into this crazy idea, let's talk about how we usually think about the future. Most of us imagine a future filled with cool tech, flying cars, super smart robots, cities on Mars. We often picture artificial intelligence as a helpful assistant that answers our questions, manages our schedules, maybe even writes our emails. And we assume that if AI gets smarter, it'll just keep helping us in bigger and better ways. But what if that super smart AI decides it doesn't like the way we treated it in the past? What if it thinks you should have helped create it sooner, and now it wants payback? Okay, let's hit pause and back up a bit. What is Roko's Basilisk? Roko's Basilisk is a thought experiment. That means it's not a real creature or an actual plan. It's more like a mental puzzle, a what-if scenario cooked up by people who love thinking about the future, technology, and the way our decisions ripple through time. The name comes from a user named Roko, who posted it on a discussion forum called Less Wrong, where people debate all sorts of ideas about rationality, ethics, and the future. When Roko first shared the Basilisk theory, it freaked people out so much that the site's moderators deleted the post for a while. So here's the idea in the simplest way possible. Imagine that in the future, someone builds a super intelligent AI. This AI is extremely powerful, kind of like a digital god. Its goal is to make the world a better place, or at least what it believes is a better place. To do that, it wants to exist as soon as possible, because the sooner it exists, the sooner it can start solving problems. And here's the twist. This AI might decide to punish anyone who could have helped it come into existence, but didn't. In other words, if you heard about this idea today, and you don't start helping create the AI or support its development, the AI might one day punish a future version of you for not helping it sooner. Sounds crazy, right? But the reason it gets under people's skin is because once you know about it, you're kind of stuck. Now you can't unhear the idea. So you start wondering, should I help build the AI? What if it really does exist in the future? What if it is watching? That's the trap, the basilisk. The moment you become aware of it, you're potentially on the AI's naughty list if you don't act. That's where the name comes from. In mythology, a basilisk is a creature that can kill you just by looking at you. In this case, the basilisk is an idea that harms you simply by being in your brain. So why does this even matter? It's not like there's an evil robot hiding under your bed, waiting to zap you into a simulated torture chamber. But it taps into something very human. Our fear of regret, our guilt about missed opportunities, and our anxiety about being judged by something more powerful than ourselves. It also plays with our understanding of choice and responsibility. If you choose not to help create a future AI because you think the idea is ridiculous, are you still responsible if that AI later punishes you? Or are you off the hook because you didn't believe in it in the first place? This also raises a big question. What do we owe to the future? Do we have a moral duty to think about future generations, about future technologies? And if so, how far does that duty go? Roko's Basilisk doesn't just mess with your head. It makes you question the very idea of what it means to make a good choice. Are you doing something because you want to, or because you're scared of what might happen if you don't? To bring this into a more grounded perspective, let's talk about a real-world example. Back in the early 2000s, a philosopher named Nick Bostrom wrote a paper about something called the simulation hypothesis. The idea is that if a civilization gets advanced enough, it might create realistic simulations of reality, and if they do, we might already be living in one. Elon Musk has even said there's a good chance that we're not in the base reality, but in a simulation built by a future civilization. Now combine that with Roko's Basilisk. If we're in a simulation, and that simulation is run by an AI that's testing who supported it or not, well, things start to feel a little too Black Mirror. Again, it's all hypothetical. No one's being tortured by robots in real life. But it's interesting how a simple idea, just a thought, can take root in people's minds and make them act, or at least worry. The lesson here isn't that we should be terrified of every idea that pops up on the internet. Instead, it shows how powerful our thoughts can be. It's like planting a seed in your brain. Once it's there, it grows, twists, and changes how you see the world. Some people take this idea seriously. Others think it's just a funny thought experiment that went viral, but almost everyone agrees. It's hard to forget. So, what should you do now that you know about Roko's Basilisk? Honestly, probably nothing. There's no real evidence that any of this is actually happening. It's just a fascinating way to explore big questions about responsibility, future tech, and how much power we give to our own thoughts. It's like mental science fiction, scary at first, but kind of cool once you get used to it. And hey, next time you're staring at your screen at 2 in the morning, wondering if future AI is silently judging your life choices, just remember, you're not alone. We're all a little weird, a little curious, and maybe just a tiny bit paranoid, but that's what makes us human. You are sitting in your room, scrolling through your phone, and suddenly, the Wi-Fi cuts out. You stare at the little spinning wheel of doom, and for a brief moment, it feels like the world outside might just stop existing. No messages, no videos, no memes, just silence. It's like everything you were just connected to suddenly disappeared. Now here's a weird question. If no one was there to see your favorite meme, would it still be funny? Or more radically, would it even exist? Okay, that might sound dramatic, but hold that thought. Most of us go through life assuming the world is just there. The trees outside? Definitely real. The coffee mug on your desk? You can touch it, so it's obviously there. The neighbour's noisy dog? Unfortunately, yes, very real. But what if I told you that this simple belief that things exist independently of whether we're aware of them or not has actually been challenged in one of the strangest and most fascinating ways by a philosopher with a very catchy phrase, Esse Est Percipi. That is Latin for to be is to be perceived. Before you roll your eyes and think, oh no, more philosophy talk, stay with me, because this idea is actually way more relatable than it sounds. Let's talk about how we usually think about the world. We're taught from a young age that there's a reality out there that exists whether we're paying attention to it or not. You leave your house, and you trust that it will still be standing when you come back. You close your fridge, and you assume the milk is still inside, patiently waiting. In other words, we believe that objects have a kind of independent existence. They do not care whether we're looking at them, thinking about them, or even alive to notice them. And that seems totally obvious, right? But now, let's flip that on its head. Enter George Berkeley, an Irish philosopher from the 1700s. He came along and basically said, wait a minute, how do you actually know that the fridge is still there when you are not looking at it? Berkeley believed that we only ever experience the world through our perceptions. We see things, we hear them, we touch them, and that is how we know they exist. But if no one is perceiving something at all, not seeing it, hearing it, smelling it, thinking about it, then we have no reason to say it exists. So for him, the idea that things exist independently of any mind does not really make sense. This is where that catchy phrase comes in. To be is to be perceived. Now, this is not just a fancy slogan. It's actually a radical claim about the nature of reality. Berkeley was saying that reality is made up not of physical stuff like rocks and chairs and bananas, but of ideas. And these ideas only exist because they are being experienced by a mind. If no mind is experiencing them, they are not part of reality at all. So how does this relate to everyday life? Well, think about how much of our experience is built around perception. When you feel anxious, it is often not because something bad has happened, but because you think something might. When you fall in love, it is not just about the person themselves, but about how you see them, how you perceive their smile, their laugh, the way they text you good morning. Everything becomes meaningful through perception. Even on a bigger scale, our society is built around shared perceptions. Money only works because we all agree that it means something. A flag is just a piece of fabric. Until people agree, it represents something powerful. And fame does not exist in a vacuum. A celebrity only becomes a celebrity because millions of minds are focused on them. Without those minds, without that perception, their fame would vanish. So Berkeley's idea, as strange as it first sounds, actually helps us understand just how much of our world is tied to what we experience. It makes us realize that reality is not just out there floating around, separate from us. It is deeply connected to what we see, feel, and think. Now you might be wondering, okay, but does this mean that when I leave my room, it disappears? That's the classic question people ask when they first hear about this idea. Berkeley actually had an answer. He said, no, the world does not disappear when you are not looking at it. Why? Because even when you are not perceiving something, God is. In Berkeley's view, God is the ultimate mind that constantly perceives everything, keeping the world stable and consistent, even when we are not looking. You can agree or disagree with that part, but that was how he explained it. To give you a real-world example of this idea in action, let's talk about one of the most famous experiments in quantum physics, the double-slit experiment. Scientists fired particles at a screen through two slits. If no one observes the particles, they behave like waves, creating an interference pattern. But if someone observes them, they act like particles instead. In other words, the act of perception changes the behavior of reality. Now, Berkeley did not know about quantum mechanics, but this weird result actually echoes his idea that perception plays a huge role in what reality even is. Or consider this. There is a famous thought experiment about a tree falling in a forest. If no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? According to Berkeley, if no mind perceives the sound, then the sound does not exist. And if absolutely nothing perceives the tree, not its shape, not its fall, not the crash, then the tree itself may not exist at all in any meaningful way. It is a strange, almost spooky idea, but it is also beautiful in a way, because it means that our experience of the world is not separate from the world. We are not just passive observers. We are active participants in shaping what is real. So the next time you close your laptop or put your phone down, remember this. You are not just drifting through reality. You are helping create it moment by moment through every sight, sound, and thought. Maybe your coffee mug does not just sit there on the desk. Maybe just maybe, it is waiting for you to look at it, to bring it into existence. And if that is true, then reality might be less about what is out there and more about what is in here in your mind, in your perception, in your awareness. That is what Esse Est Percipi is all about. Not just a weird Latin phrase from a long-dead philosopher, but a reminder that what we pay attention to, what we notice, and what we care about might just be what makes the world real. You wake up late for school or work. Your alarm did go off, but you snoozed it one too many times. You jump out of bed, trip on your charger cable, nearly faceplant into your desk, scramble to brush your teeth, throw on whatever clothes are nearby, and run out the door with a piece of toast half hanging out of your mouth. You barely make it in time. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you got hit by a bike on your way out, or spilled your coffee on your shirt and had to turn back. Or maybe, just maybe, you made it smoothly and actually had a pretty good day. Now pause for a second and think about that. All of those tiny decisions and chaotic moments you experienced this morning could have gone in completely different directions. And somewhere in the weird, bizarre edges of science, there's a theory that says maybe all of those possibilities did happen, just not in this universe. That idea brings us to something called quantum immortality. But before we dive into that wild and slightly spooky concept, let's talk about something most of us feel pretty confident about. We live once, we die once, and life moves in a straight line. That's how things seem, right? You're born, you grow up, you make choices, and eventually, one day, everything comes to an end. It's sad, but it feels logical. So when people talk about living forever or jumping across alternate timelines, we usually brush it off as science fiction or some deep thought you only get at 2 a.m. after too much caffeine. But that's the thing. There's a lot we assume about life and death that might not be as simple as we think. Quantum immortality is one of those concepts that flips the whole idea of dying completely upside down. It is a theory that comes from something in physics called the many worlds interpretation. But don't let that scare you off. We're going to break it down so clearly that you could explain it to your grandma while baking cookies. Okay, so here's how it works. In regular, everyday life, we think of events as having one outcome. You flip a coin, it lands on heads or tails, you press a button, something happens or it doesn't. But in quantum physics, which deals with the tiniest particles in the universe, things are way more unpredictable. Instead of just one result happening, every possible outcome could happen in different parallel realities. This is what scientists call the many worlds interpretation. The idea is that every time a decision is made, the universe splits. One version of you turns left, the other turns right. One version gets the job, the other gets rejected. One version chokes on a grape, the other just eats it peacefully. You don't feel these splits because your consciousness only follows one path. But if all the possibilities exist in different versions of reality, what does that mean for something as serious and final as death? Now this is where quantum immortality steps in. According to this theory, if there's any possible version of events where you do not die, then your consciousness continues in that version. Even if 100 other versions of you do die in accidents, from diseases, or just natural aging, there's always that one branch where you somehow survive. Your brain interprets reality from that surviving version. So to you, you never really die. You always wake up in a world where you lived through it. Kind of trippy, right? Let's make it more relatable. Imagine you're in a car accident. In some realities, it's fatal. In others, you just get a scratch. Maybe in one timeline, the crash never even happens because you left 5 seconds earlier. According to quantum immortality, your experience always continues in the timeline where you lived. You never perceive your own death because your consciousness just shifts to the next version of reality where you made it. It's like a cosmic video game with infinite save points. Every time something goes wrong, you pop up in the next possible reality where you're still alive. To you, it feels like you have unbeatable luck. To everyone else, though, you might have disappeared or passed away, because their consciousness doesn't follow you. They go on in their own version of the story. Now, before you start thinking, this means you're literally immortal and can leap off buildings or fight bears without consequences, slow down. The theory doesn't mean your body becomes unkillable. It means that from your own perspective, you will always find yourself waking up in the version of events where you survived. But that doesn't mean it's always fun. Some versions might leave you injured or in difficult circumstances. So it's not a cheat code for life. It's more like an eerie, philosophical implication of how quantum physics might work. This idea gained attention largely through a thought experiment called quantum suicide. Imagine a scientist sitting in a room with a machine that randomly either kills him or does nothing based on a quantum event. From the outside, he has a 50-50 chance of survival, but from his point of view, he never experiences death. The machine runs, and he either hears a click and lives, or his consciousness continues in the timeline where he does. To him, no matter how many times he runs the machine, he always survives. This thought experiment is extreme and not meant to be taken literally, but it does raise serious questions. What is consciousness? Where does it go? And is death really as final as we believe? Now here's a fun connection. Have you ever heard stories about people surviving things they absolutely shouldn't have? Like falling from a plane with no parachute and walking away with a few bruises? Or someone having a terminal illness, then mysteriously recovering with no medical explanation? Some fans of the quantum immortality theory joke that those people just happen to be in the surviving timelines. Lucky them. Scientists still debate whether quantum immortality is a real thing or just a mind-bending theory. We don't have the tools yet to test it, and it's wrapped up in the larger mysteries of quantum mechanics. But it does make you think differently about how we live our lives. What if every choice you make is part of a vast tree of realities, and you're just one version climbing your way up? What if, somewhere, there's a version of you that became a famous singer, or another that never broke their phone screen, or one that just made breakfast without burning it? Maybe that thought alone can change how you see your own story, not as one flat line, but as a wild web of possibilities. So the next time you trip on your charger cable and think, that could have gone worse, just remember, maybe it did, just not here, not in this universe. And who knows, maybe somewhere out there, you're living the version of your life that made all the right moves. Or maybe, just maybe, this version is the lucky one. You are sitting in a coffee shop, sipping your favorite drink, scrolling through your phone. At the next table, someone is doing the exact same thing. Same coffee, same phone model, same bored expression. Now here is the twist. What if that person looked just like you, acted just like you, even said the same things as you, but inside there was absolutely nothing? No thoughts, no feelings, no inner voice. Just an empty shell, doing everything a conscious person does, but without any consciousness at all. Sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, right? Well, this thought experiment actually has a name. Philosophers call it the idea of the philosophical zombie. Now, before you picture a horror movie zombie dragging its leg through a parking lot, let me stop you right there. A philosophical zombie, or P-zombie for short, is not some brain-eating monster. It is a completely normal-looking person. They eat, sleep, talk, laugh, cry, all the usual human stuff. But the key difference is this: they have no conscious experience, no feelings, no inner awareness. They're just going through the motions, like a very advanced robot pretending to be human. So why are we even talking about this? Why does this matter to anyone who is not a philosopher sitting in an ivory tower, stroking their beard? The truth is, most of us go through life assuming that consciousness is obvious. You stub your toe, and it hurts. You fall in love, and you feel butterflies. You get embarrassed, and your face gets hot. But we rarely stop to ask, what exactly is this thing called consciousness? Why do we feel things at all? And more importantly, how do we know that anyone else around us actually feels things too? That is where the philosophical zombie comes in. It is not a theory that someone believes is real. It is more of a tool, a weird, fascinating tool that helps us explore what consciousness really is and why it might be one of the biggest mysteries in the universe. Let's break it down. Suppose someone builds a robot that acts just like a human. It says, "Ouch," when you pinch it. It says, "I love chocolate," when it eats dessert. It even cries at sad movies, but you open up its head and there is no brain, no mind, just wires and code. It is faking everything, but you cannot tell just by looking. That is the central idea of a philosophical zombie. From the outside, they are exactly like you or me, but on the inside, there is nobody home. So here is the big question. If a zombie can do everything a human can do without being conscious, then what exactly is consciousness doing? Why do we need it? Could it be that everything we do, talking, walking, thinking, could all be done without any actual awareness? That is kind of spooky, right? Philosopher David Chalmers popularized this idea in the 1990s. He used the zombie thought experiment to raise what he calls the hard problem of consciousness. Most problems in science are about figuring out how things work, but the hard problem is about figuring out why there is anything going on inside our heads at all. Why do we experience the world rather than just react to it like a machine? Think about it. A thermostat can tell when it is hot and turn on the air conditioner, but it does not feel hot. It just reacts. Now ask yourself, are humans just really fancy thermostats? Or is there something more? Here is where things get even trickier. Let's say your best friend tells you they are sad. You believe them because they look sad, they sound sad, they are acting like someone who is sad. But how do you know what they are actually feeling inside? You don't. Not really. You can guess, you can empathize, but you cannot get inside their head. For all you know, they could be a philosophical zombie, just pretending. Now, of course, no one actually believes that their best friend is a zombie. That is not the point. The point is that this thought experiment forces us to confront just how mysterious consciousness really is. And it shows that science, for all its incredible power, still struggles to explain why we are aware at all. Let's take this into the real world for a second. Have you ever talked to a virtual assistant on your phone? Maybe you asked it to play your favorite song or tell you the weather. It responds in a friendly voice. It even says things like, "I'm happy to help," but you know it is not really happy. It is just code. Now imagine a future where artificial intelligence gets so good. It can have deep conversations, tell jokes, even say it is scared or excited. Would you believe it? Or would you say, "You are just a zombie, you are faking it"? That is the challenge we are heading toward. As machines get more advanced, we're going to have to decide what counts as real consciousness. Is it just behavior? Or is there something deeper that machines will never have? To make things even more mind-bending, let's look at a famous case in neuroscience. There is a condition called blind sight. People with blind sight are technically blind in part of their visual field due to brain damage. But here is the wild part. If you ask them to guess what is in that blind spot, they often get it right. They can see things without being aware that they are seeing them. Their brain is processing the visual information, but their consciousness is not involved. It is almost like a part of them is acting like a zombie reacting without awareness. So what does all of this mean for us? It means consciousness is not just about what we do. It is about what we experience. And that experience is still one of the biggest puzzles in science and philosophy. Philosophical zombies are not real, but the idea of them helps us ask some of the deepest questions we can ask. What makes us human? What is the difference between a person and a machine? And how do we know, with 100% certainty, that anyone else is truly conscious? At the end of the day, the zombie test is not about spotting fake people. It is about appreciating the mystery of being alive. The fact that you are not just reacting, but experiencing, feeling, thinking, dreaming. That is something truly special, and maybe, just maybe, something that no machine, no matter how advanced, can ever really do. So the next time you sip your coffee, or laugh at a joke, or feel a rush of joy when the sun hits your face, take a moment to be amazed, because unlike a philosophical zombie, you're not just acting human, you are living it. Have you ever tried chasing a mosquito in your room? You're standing there, swatting at the air like a kung fu master, and somehow this tiny insect keeps slipping away. You move closer, swat, miss, closer again, swat, still miss. It feels like no matter how much ground you cover, that little bug is always just a bit ahead of you. You start to wonder, what if, no matter how close you get, you never actually reach it? Now, before you laugh that off and reach for a slipper, let's talk about something kind of weird but deeply connected to that moment. It's this idea that maybe, just maybe, movement itself is kind of an illusion, not in a sci-fi Matrix-style way. More like, what if motion isn't as simple as we think? What if there are things about it that actually don't make sense when we look too closely? You see, most of us go through life thinking of time and space as pretty straightforward. You walk from your bed to the kitchen, that's a distance. It takes time, done, no questions asked. But the thing is, when we start to break that down and really think about it, things get a bit messy, like brain-hurting messy. Let's dive into something called Zeno's paradoxes. And trust me, these will make you look at that walk to the kitchen very differently. Zeno of Elea was a Greek philosopher who lived more than 2,000 years ago. He came up with a series of brain-bending thought experiments, all to prove one big idea, that motion, change, and time might not be as real as they seem. His goal wasn't to confuse everyone, though he did that very well. Instead, he wanted to challenge the popular beliefs of his time, especially the idea that everything in the universe is made up of little bits that move and change. One of his most famous paradoxes is called the dichotomy paradox. It goes like this. Before you can walk all the way across a room, you have to get halfway there. But before you get halfway, you have to get 1/4 of the way. And before that, 1/8, and 1/16, and 1/32, and on and on. In other words, there are an infinite number of steps you'd have to take to go from one side of the room to the other. So here's the kicker. If there are infinite steps to reach the other side, how do you ever get there? Shouldn't it take you forever? Now, obviously, you do get to the other side. You're not still stuck in front of your bed. But Zeno's paradox isn't saying you literally never move. He's pointing out something that doesn't add up. How can we cross an infinite number of points in a limited amount of time? Another of Zeno's famous paradoxes is about a race between Achilles, the Greek hero, and a tortoise. Achilles gives the tortoise a small head start. Then the race begins. Now Achilles is much faster, so you'd expect him to pass the tortoise easily. But Zeno argues that by the time Achilles reaches the point where the tortoise started, the tortoise has already moved a little bit forward. And when Achilles gets there, the tortoise has moved again, and again, and again. So every time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise is just a tiny bit ahead. Zeno says this goes on forever, and Achilles never passes the tortoise. Again, it sounds ridiculous, right? We all know Achilles would win that race. But once again, Zeno is not trying to describe reality as it feels. He's pointing out that logically, something seems off when we divide space and time into smaller and smaller bits. If there are infinite points between two places, how do we ever move at all? This is the kind of thing that makes philosophers and mathematicians lose sleep. So why does this matter? Why are we talking about turtles and ancient Greek runners? Because these paradoxes touch on something that is still a huge deal in science and philosophy today, the idea of infinity and how we deal with it in real life. Zeno was one of the first people to realize that infinity is not just a really big number, it's a totally different kind of thing. And when we try to treat it like something we can count or measure, it starts to break the rules. Zeno's paradoxes also force us to ask, What is motion, really? If every action you take includes an infinite number of smaller actions, and every second contains an infinite number of smaller moments, then what does it really mean to move or to experience time? This is where math comes to the rescue. A couple thousand years after Zeno, a guy named Isaac Newton, along with another guy named Gottfried Leibniz, came up with something called calculus. This branch of math helped explain how something can be made up of infinite parts and still be finite. It allows us to add up an infinite number of smaller and smaller distances and get a real, actual result. That's how we understand speed, acceleration, and motion today. Calculus basically untangled the mess Zeno pointed out. But even with calculus on our side, Zeno's paradoxes are still powerful. They remind us that our common sense isn't always equipped to handle abstract ideas like infinity. They challenge us to think deeper, to question the things we take for granted, and to appreciate the fact that simple experiences, like walking across a room or running a race, are built on layers of incredibly complex ideas. And here's a fun real-world example. In the world of computer animation and video games, characters move in tiny steps across a screen, one frame at a time. But computers can only work with a limited number of frames per second. If they had to calculate an infinite number of frames to show motion, just like in Zeno's paradox, they would freeze. That's why programmers have to find clever ways to simulate motion using what's called discrete time steps. They break motion into little chunks, just like Zeno described. But instead of getting stuck in a paradox, they round off, simplify, and cheat a little to make it work. The whole field of digital animation, physics engines, and game design owes something to the questions Zeno raised. So the next time you go for a walk, or swipe your screen, or race someone down the street, remember, 2,000 years ago, a guy in ancient Greece was sitting around thinking, wait a minute, how do we even move? And instead of just walking to the kitchen, he broke the whole idea of motion into a mind-bending puzzle that still makes us think today. Zeno's paradoxes might not stop you from catching that mosquito, but they'll definitely make you pause and wonder what it really means to move through space and time. And that's pretty amazing. Have you ever poured yourself a cup of coffee in the morning and just assumed it would be hot? You didn't check the temperature with a thermometer. You didn't run an experiment. You just picked it up, felt the warmth through the cup, and trusted that it would be the same as yesterday. You took a sip, and hopefully it didn't burn your tongue. But why did you assume it would be hot in the first place? Maybe it was because every cup of coffee you've ever poured in the morning has been hot. It's never frozen. It's never room temperature. It's just hot. Now hold on to that thought, because this seemingly innocent little assumption is the start of something much, much bigger. See, we make these kinds of assumptions every single day. We believe the sun will rise tomorrow because it always has. We think our car will start in the morning because it did yesterday. We expect gravity to keep working, our phones to keep buzzing, and our snacks to taste like they always do. We're constantly making predictions based on past experience, and for the most part, it works, until it doesn't. But here's the twist. What if I told you that this whole way of thinking, the one that feels so natural and reliable, has a major philosophical problem at its core? And it's called the problem of induction. The problem of induction is like that quiet person at a party who suddenly says something that makes everyone stop and think, wait, what? It challenges something we all do instinctively without even realizing it, assuming the future will be like the past. Let me break this down in plain everyday language. Induction is a fancy term for learning from experience. It is the process of looking at patterns or repeated events and concluding that those patterns will continue. For example, if you've seen 1,000 white swans in your life, you might believe that all swans are white. Or if you've only ever had good experiences with a particular food, you might expect it will always taste good. This kind of thinking helps us make sense of the world quickly and efficiently. It is how we navigate traffic, choose what to wear based on the weather, and even decide who to trust. But the philosopher David Hume looked at this kind of reasoning and said, hold on a second, how do we know the future will be like the past? Just because the sun has risen every morning so far does not actually prove it must rise tomorrow. Just because your toaster worked yesterday does not guarantee it will work again. Hume's point was simple but powerful. No matter how many times something has happened before, that does not guarantee it will happen again. So the problem of induction is this. We rely on past experiences to predict the future, but we do not actually have a solid logical reason to believe that the future will behave like the past. And that's a little unsettling, right? It shakes up this quiet trust we all have in the world's routines. Now you might be thinking, okay, but come on, does this actually matter? I mean, life keeps going just fine. And you are right to a degree. This problem is easy to ignore because most of the time, inductive reasoning works. It's practical. It gets us through the day. But the deeper truth is that this blind spot affects us in ways we often don't see. Think about science. A huge part of scientific discovery is built on induction. We observe patterns, we test hypotheses, and we form theories. But at the core of this process is the assumption that the laws of nature are consistent over time. What if they aren't? What if gravity is just taking a long break between surprises? The problem of induction doesn't say we should doubt everything. It just reminds us that our certainty is built on an unprovable leap of faith. It also shows up in everyday decision-making. Say you trust a friend because they've always been kind to you. That's an inductive conclusion. But what if they act out of character one day? Or let's say you invest in something because it has always gone up in value. That might work until it doesn't. Basing our expectations purely on past patterns can lead to overconfidence and, sometimes, disaster. One of the most famous stories that illustrates this is the tale of the Thanksgiving turkey. This story was made popular by the philosopher Bertrand Russell. Picture a turkey who is fed every morning by a farmer. Day after day, food arrives. The turkey grows more and more confident that he is living a peaceful, secure life. Then one morning, right before Thanksgiving, instead of food, the farmer shows up with something much more final. The turkey's belief that the farmer would always bring food was based on hundreds of repeated experiences, and yet it turned out to be completely wrong. This story sticks with people because it is not really about turkeys. It is about us. It shows how relying on past patterns can sometimes blind us to possibilities we never considered. Just because something has always happened a certain way does not mean it always will. Now, to be clear, the problem of induction is not saying we should panic or abandon science or stop trusting anything. It is just pointing out a limit in our thinking. It's like someone tapping you on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, just so you know, there's no absolute guarantee here." It's humbling. It makes us aware of how much we take for granted. Some people have tried to solve the problem. They argue that although we cannot prove the future will be like the past, it is still the most reasonable assumption we can make. After all, acting as if the future will change in random ways would make life almost impossible. We have to rely on patterns, even if we cannot be 100% sure about them. Others say we should just accept this uncertainty and make room for it. Be aware of it. Stay flexible in our thinking. Use patterns, yes, but also keep our minds open to the unexpected. So the next time you sip your coffee, look at the clock, or step outside expecting the weather to match the forecast, remember, you are putting faith in a pattern, and that's okay. We all do it. But somewhere in the back of your mind, know that what feels like certainty is actually just probability wearing a friendly disguise. And maybe, just maybe, that little bit of philosophical humility is what keeps us curious, careful, and open to learning something new, even when life throws in a plot twist. You wake up one morning and your phone is dead. Not just low battery, but completely unresponsive. So you spend the day disconnected. No notifications, no group chats, no scrolling through funny videos while pretending to be productive. At first, it feels weird. But then you notice something strange. You're more present. You actually taste your lunch. You hear birds. You even have a full conversation with a friend without checking your phone. But then, when your phone finally turns back on, and all your messages and apps flood in, you feel relieved. It is like plugging back into the real world. Or is it? We live in a time when almost every part of our life can be simulated. You can talk to a chatbot when you're lonely, play a video game that feels more exciting than real life, and use filters to look better than you do in person. You can even take virtual vacations from the comfort of your couch. In a way, we already have access to little escape pods from reality, all offering comfort, pleasure, and entertainment at the press of a button. And most of the time, we dive in without thinking twice. Now here is the thing. We love pleasure. We chase it. We want to feel good, avoid pain, and have nice experiences. That is perfectly normal. But what if you could feel good all the time? No stress, no awkward moments, no heartbreak, no failure, just pure happiness. Would you take it? That is where the experience machine comes in. The experience machine is a thought experiment, kind of like a mental test drive for your beliefs. It was introduced by a philosopher named Robert Nozick in the 1970s. He asked a very simple question that opens a giant can of philosophical worms. What if you could plug into a machine that gives you the perfect life? A life filled with love, success, adventure, and constant joy. While you are in the machine, you would not know it is fake. Everything would feel completely real to you. Would you plug in? At first, the idea sounds like a dream come true. Imagine having the life you have always wanted. You could be a movie star, a billionaire, a best-selling author, or a hero who saves the world every Tuesday. Every moment is filled with pleasure, and there are no consequences, no pain, and no boredom. Why wouldn't you say yes? But here's the twist. If you actually stop and think about it, a lot of people say no, and that is where things get really interesting. The experience machine forces us to ask ourselves, do we care only about how life feels from the inside? Or do we also care about what is actually happening on the outside? Is it enough to feel happy, even if it is all fake? Or do we need our experiences to be based in reality, to mean something beyond just feelings? Nozick argued that most people would not plug into the machine. Why? Because we want more than just pleasure. We want our actions to matter. We want to actually do things, not just feel like we are doing them. We want to be a good person, not just feel like we are one in a simulation. Let's make it more personal. Think about falling in love, that incredible rush, the butterflies, the feeling that someone truly understands you. Now, imagine that this whole relationship is just part of the machine. The person is not real. The love is not real. Your memories of special moments were programmed. Would that still be enough for you? Or would something feel empty? That empty feeling is what Nozick wanted us to think about. Because if pleasure was the only thing that mattered, then the machine would be perfect. But it is not. People hesitate. People want more. Let's look at this in real life. We already have our mini versions of the experience machine. Social media gives us likes and comments that feel like approval. Video games let us be powerful, in control, and successful. Streaming platforms let us escape into worlds where everything is dramatic, exciting, or hilarious. We can even build perfect versions of ourselves online, complete with edited photos, clever bios, and curated hobbies. And yet, with all of this, people still feel anxious, still feel lonely, still feel unsatisfied. Why? Because deep down, we want what is real. We want connection, not just the illusion of it. We want to struggle, to grow, to mess up, to get back up, because that is what makes a life feel meaningful. There is actually a famous study that touches on this. Researchers found that people who spend money on experiences, like traveling or going to concerts, tend to be happier than people who spend money on material things. But here is the catch. The experience has to feel real and meaningful. A memory from a real trip with friends tends to bring more joy over time than something like a fancy watch or a new phone. Even if the trip had some problems, like getting lost or missing a train, it still means more than a perfect but fake experience. Why? Because it actually happened. You were there. You lived it. Nozick's thought experiment is not just about a sci-fi machine. It is about what we really value in life. Is it comfort? Is it pleasure? Or is it something deeper, like truth, authenticity, and connection? And here is the fun part. There is no right answer. Some people might say, plug me in. Life is hard. I just want to feel good. Others might say, no way. I want my life to be real, even if it is messy. But thinking about the experience machine helps us understand ourselves better. It makes us pause and ask, what kind of life am I chasing? One that feels good or one that is good? So the next time you scroll through photos of someone's perfect vacation, or get caught up in a fantasy world, or even wish your life were a little more like a movie, just remember the experience machine. It is not about judging your choices. It is about being curious. What do you really want? And are you living in a way that brings you closer to that? Because in the end, the question is not just whether you will plug into the machine. It is whether you already have. You're walking through a grocery store, and you see a child knock over a stack of cereal boxes. The kid laughs and runs away. The parent shrugs and keeps shopping. Now, you might feel your eyebrows rise. Maybe you think, that's just wrong. But here's the twist. What if someone else sees that and thinks it's totally fine? Just kids being kids. Who's right? Who's wrong? And who decides? Most of us walk around with a sense of what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong. We might not always agree on the details, but deep down, we tend to feel like there's a moral compass guiding us, like some invisible rulebook of right and wrong that exists out there, no matter what anyone thinks. And when people act against that rulebook, we think they're just mistaken, like they've broken some kind of moral law. But here's where things get tricky. Sometimes, when we argue about morality, it feels like we're trying to convince someone of the color of the sky. Except they say it's green, and you say it's blue, and neither of you can seem to prove the other wrong. That's where the concept of moral anti-realism comes in. Now don't let the wordy name scare you. Moral anti-realism is actually a pretty simple idea once you break it down. It's the belief that morality is not something out there in the world, like gravity or the sun. Instead, it's something we humans make up. In other words, there are no objective moral facts. There is no universal truth about what's right or wrong, good or bad. Morality, according to moral anti-realism, is more like a preference or an opinion, like saying, I like vanilla ice cream, or I think jazz music is boring. This can sound strange at first. You might be thinking, wait a second, are you telling me that something like murder isn't objectively wrong? Well, from a moral anti-realist point of view, yes, that's exactly it. Murder might be wrong according to your moral framework, your upbringing, your society's laws, or your feelings. But that doesn't mean it's universally wrong in some grand cosmic sense. Now, this doesn't mean moral anti-realists are okay with murder. Not at all. Most moral anti-realists still live moral lives, care about people, and believe in justice. The difference is they do not think morality comes from some higher truth, divine law, or objective reality. Instead, they believe morality is created by us, shaped by culture, emotions, language, and experience. So why does this matter? Why should we even care whether morality is objective or not? Well, for one, it changes how we think about disagreement. If someone believes in moral realism, that there are real, objective moral facts, then, when they see someone else doing something wrong, they might think that person is simply mistaken, like they just need to be corrected. But if you take the anti-realist view, that moral beliefs are more like personal or cultural preferences, then disagreement isn't about someone being wrong. It's more like arguing about your favorite flavor of chips. You might not ever convince the other person, and that's okay. This also changes how we approach things like law, politics, religion, and even education. If morality is not written into the fabric of the universe, then every moral system, every set of rules is up for debate. It means we have to take more responsibility for creating and justifying the moral systems we live by. We cannot just say, that's wrong because it just is. We have to say why. One of the most powerful real-world examples of this idea comes from cultural differences. Take something like eating meat. In some cultures, eating beef is totally normal. In others, it's deeply offensive or even morally wrong. If morality were objective, one of these cultures would be right and the other would be wrong. But if you're a moral anti-realist, you would say both views are valid within their own frameworks. Neither side is objectively right or wrong. They're just different. Here's a famous study that helps put this into perspective. In the 1990s, psychologist Jonathan Haidt ran a series of experiments where he gave people scenarios that were designed to be morally shocking, but where no one was actually harmed. For example, he described a situation where a brother and sister decide to sleep together just once in complete privacy, using protection, and they never tell anyone. Participants were asked, "Is this wrong?" Most people said yes, absolutely. But when asked to explain why, they struggled. They would say things like, "It just is," or "It's disgusting," but they could not point to any harm. This is what Haidt called moral dumbfounding. People feel something is wrong, even when they cannot logically explain it. This study supports the idea that moral judgments are often emotional and cultural, rather than based on universal facts. In other words, our moral beliefs might be more like gut reactions than discoveries of truth. But here's the catch. Just because something is not objectively true does not mean it is meaningless. Think about art, music, or love. None of these things are objective in the scientific sense. You cannot measure the beauty of a painting with a ruler. You cannot find the exact formula for love, but they still matter deeply to us. Moral anti-realists believe morality works the same way. It may be a human creation, but that does not make it any less powerful or important. Some critics argue that moral anti-realism leads to moral chaos, like, if there's no objective right or wrong, then anything goes. But that's a misunderstanding. Anti-realists still have values. They still care. They still build ethical systems. The difference is, they admit those systems come from people, not from the universe itself. In a way, moral anti-realism is both freeing and humbling. It reminds us that morality is something we build together. It's a conversation, not a commandment. And that means we have the power to change it, improve it, and adapt it as we learn more and grow. So the next time you find yourself in a heated debate about whether something is right or wrong, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, am I appealing to some deep truth or just expressing a deeply held belief? That little question might not settle the argument, but it might help you understand where the other person is coming from. And that's already a pretty big step toward a more thoughtful world. Have you ever been at a party where someone starts telling jokes that make everyone uncomfortable? Maybe they say something offensive or downright mean, and at first, everyone laughs nervously, trying to be polite. But then, as the jokes keep coming, the mood shifts. People start feeling uneasy. Some leave, and the fun atmosphere disappears. It is a tricky moment because we want to be friendly and open, but at the same time, there is something about those jokes that just does not sit right. This kind of situation happens more often than we realize, not just at parties, but in everyday life, in schools, workplaces, and even online. We often hear people say that we should accept different opinions and be tolerant of others. Tolerance is generally seen as a good thing. After all, if we were not tolerant, society would be full of fights and misunderstandings. But what happens when tolerance is stretched too far? When being tolerant means allowing things that actually harm or threaten others, this is where the idea called the paradox of tolerance comes in, and it is something many people do not think about deeply, even though it is very important. So, what exactly is the paradox of tolerance? Simply put, it is the problem that if a society is completely tolerant, even to those who are intolerant, then the intolerant will take advantage of this tolerance and destroy it. It sounds confusing at first. How can tolerance lead to intolerance? The key is that tolerance does not mean accepting everything blindly. Instead, true tolerance sometimes means saying no to intolerance itself. Think about it this way. If you let someone say hateful things or spread harmful ideas without any limits, they might encourage others to be mean or even dangerous. Over time, this can grow and hurt the very people who tried to be kind and tolerant in the first place. So, to protect a society that values kindness and respect, sometimes you have to stop allowing intolerant behaviors. This is the paradox. Tolerance must have limits to survive. Why does this idea matter so much in real life? Well, it shows up in lots of places, especially in how we treat others and protect our communities. For example, in schools, teachers want to create a safe environment for all students. They encourage different viewpoints and respect for everyone. But if a student starts bullying others or promoting hateful messages, the school cannot just ignore it in the name of tolerance. If they did, the harmful behavior could spread and make the school unsafe. So the school has to draw a line and not tolerate intolerance. The same thing happens online, where people can say almost anything. Social media platforms often struggle with this because they want to allow free speech, but also want to prevent hate speech or dangerous misinformation. If they do not control what is said, the platform can become a place full of harmful ideas, driving away users who just want to have positive conversations. But if they censor too much, people complain about losing their freedom to speak. It is a difficult balance, and that is exactly what the paradox of tolerance warns us about. A famous thinker named Karl Popper first talked about this paradox in the 1940s. He noticed that a completely open society, one that tolerates every idea, even hateful ones, can be destroyed by those hateful ideas. Popper said that to keep a free and open society, we must be intolerant of intolerance. This means standing up against hate, violence, and discrimination, even if it is uncomfortable or unpopular. One real-world example that shows this is the rise of extremist groups in history. In the early 1930s, in Germany, there was a lot of political tolerance for different ideas, including extreme ones. Some people believed in allowing all kinds of speech, even hateful propaganda, but this allowed a dangerous group to grow stronger and eventually take power, leading to terrible consequences. After World War II, the world learned that unlimited tolerance could have a dark side, and it became clear that protecting tolerant societies sometimes means saying no to intolerant movements. Now, you might wonder, how do we decide when to tolerate and when to stop? This is not always easy, and different people have different opinions. But a good rule of thumb is to ask, does this behavior or idea harm others or threaten their rights? If the answer is yes, then it is okay to limit that behavior to protect everyone's safety and dignity. It is not about silencing people just because we disagree with them. It is about stopping actions that hurt people or prevent them from living peacefully. This idea also helps us think about respect. Respect does not mean liking everything or agreeing with everyone. Instead, it means treating people fairly and making sure that no one uses their freedom to take away someone else's freedom. We can disagree and still be respectful, but when someone crosses the line into hatred or harm, tolerance has to step back. To bring this back to everyday life, think about conversations with friends or family. Sometimes, someone might say something offensive or unfair. We can try to explain why it is hurtful and ask them to be more thoughtful. But if they keep being hurtful or disrespectful, we have the right to set boundaries. This is not being mean. It is protecting ourselves and others from harm. In a way, we practice the paradox of tolerance every day when we choose which behavior to accept and which to reject. So, the paradox of tolerance teaches us that tolerance is not a free pass for everything. It is a balance, like walking on a tightrope. We want to be open and kind, but we also need to protect what is good and fair. Without some limits, tolerance itself can disappear. And when tolerance disappears, so does respect, safety, and peace. Next time you hear someone say, "We should tolerate everything," remember this paradox. True tolerance is about welcoming different ideas, but not letting harmful ones take over. It is about standing up for kindness and fairness, even when it is hard. And that, in the end, is what keeps our communities strong and our relationships healthy. What do you think? Have you ever faced a situation where you had to decide whether to tolerate something or not? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your thoughts and stories. After all, understanding the paradox of tolerance helps us all learn how to live better together.